X-Men 97 Season 2 Episode 6 is officially here, so let's just get right into it, because today we're talking X-Men 97 Season 2 Episode 6 breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, so getting right into it, right off the bat, this episode started out the way I wanted last episode to start out, and that's dealing with a lot of the trauma from losing Magneto. And we actually see Professor Xavier in the Danger Room recreating the events of Magneto's death over and over again, as a way to work through his trauma. After all, he did just lose his best friend. However, he also has another dilemma. He doesn't know how to truly honor his friend. We saw what Magneto decided to do when Charles was gone and left him in charge of the X-Men, but now seeing the antithesis of that and seeing Charles in the position Magneto was in at that time is just a really cool switch for the characters, and it's really interesting to see how much Charles Xavier truly valued Magneto. And he's even stating in these moments that he doesn't know how to exist without Magneto. He's not sure how to move forward without Magneto. It's always been easier because Magneto has always been there. And the thing I find so interesting about this is that although they were enemies a lot of the times, they always had a deep respect for one another, and they always had a great love for one another. Their friendship was the thing that always shined through. Even if Magneto and Charles weren't agreeing about something, they still had their friendship to fall back on, because at the end of the day, they both were trying to fight, because at the end of the day, both of them truly wanted what was best for mutant society. And we see throughout this episode, Charles Xavier is struggling with that. He's struggling with what he is supposed to do moving forward. And speaking of characters struggling with what to do moving forward, that brings me to another thing I loved about this episode, and that is Polaris and her journey that we see her progressing through. We see that the public is comparing her to Magneto. Yes, we know that she is the daughter of Magneto. However, we get even more about that in this episode, and we see that she is struggling with that. She is struggling with being compared to her father, someone that she herself says that she barely knew. All she ever knew about him was what the public said. She never had a true connection to him. Instead, she actually comments later on that Professor Xavier is essentially the one who raised her. He's the one that she sees as a father figure. However, before Polaris can have all of this tremendous character growth, she had some negative things happen for her in this episode, and although they were negative for her character, they were absolutely awesome to see unfold on screen. That entire sequence of her just absolutely demolishing every one of the terrorists on that boat was really cool. Her at one point just deciding to lift up the entire boat and dump all the terrorists into the water, and we actually hear one of her superiors radio over to her that she is going too far, that this was supposed to be a covert mission. And to Polaris's point, she did kind of de-escalate the situation. She got all of the weapons out of the way, she took all of the cargo and the boat that X-Factor was worried about, and she ensured that the terrorists wouldn't hurt anyone, and she also didn't kill any of them. Now, a little bit later, she almost ends up killing them. However, also in her defense, she was being fired at, and she split the boat in order to defend herself. And yes, it probably would have fell on all of them. However, again, they started it with the violence. However, that being said, considering how the sentiment is around mutants, it does make sense that after this occurred, Polaris was inevitably let go of X-Factor. And in my opinion, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to her, because after this, we see her rejoining the X-Men, at least kind of. She shows up and starts talking to Jean, Scott, and Beast. They have a nice little reunion, and after that, we see her reunited with Charles Xavier, and this is when they start to have the conversations about Magneto, about the fact that Charles was realistically the one that actually raised her, and that she doesn't even know Magneto at all, but yet she is still always compared to him. And I really like that Charles was telling her that she needs to embrace herself. She needs to know more about her father. Pushing that down is actually a big thing that is causing a lot of her trauma and a lot of her pain to be worse. Now, after this, some of the X-Men decide to go to Genosha. However, Polaris and a few others do stay behind at the X-Mansion, and as they are there, they are attacked by an enemy. However, that enemy is unknown, and it is discovered that it is actually the Danger Room come to life and becoming the villain Danger to put the X-Men through this ultimate trial that she has devised, because she sees them as weak. She sees them as needing to evolve. And although Polaris and Bishop are able to keep all of the new students safe, we do see that Danger is on her way to Genosha to ensure the evolution of the professor and the mutants that accompanied him to Genosha. And at this point, they mention once again that the X-Men have been outlawed by President Kelly, so that's why Storm can't really go, because at this moment, she is actually the head mistress of the Xavier Institute. So if she were to go and engage Danger in a battle, she would actually cause a huge issue. However, in my opinion, I just think that's really stupid. I'm sorry, but the fact that they are outlawing vilifying the X-Men makes absolutely no sense to me. I feel like the X-Men in this universe have always proven that they are the ones who are doing good. And did we not learn anything from season 1 vilifying the X-Men? I feel like this is something that always happens. They're always making the X-Men the bad guys no matter what they do. And I feel like that is something that makes the X-Men such relatable characters, because even despite this, even despite always being vilified, they still always do the right thing. They always still try to save people at the end of the day. And that's why, in my opinion, they are without a doubt the best hero group in all of Marvel. However, it is at this point we get another scene that I absolutely love, and that is Danger attacking Charles Xavier, Jean, Scott, and Beast. And while this scene was pretty cool, I thought it was kind of lame how easily Scott and Jean just got taken out. Beast got taken out with one shot as well. The Professor actually ended up lasting even longer in this fight somehow, which Danger even points out. However, luckily for all of them, Polaris and Bishop do arrive, and Polaris starts to go absolutely berserk. However, she does decide at the beginning, she decides to control herself because she doesn't want everyone else to be hurt. And this is where Charles Xavier decides to encourage her to let that part of herself out. And he even said that he has seen Magneto pull off the miraculous before. And this is where she starts to share a lot of her reservations that reveal a lot more about her character. She doesn't want to unleash that power. She doesn't know that she can fully control it. And this is where Bishop, one of my favorite character moments in the episode, and he decides to reassure her that it will be okay, and any of the fallout he will take on himself. And we actually get to see this. Once she unleashes her full power on Danger, we see that Bishop is absorbing all of the fallout to protect everyone else. And I think my favorite moment in this entire episode was the moment where Charles Xavier decided to help Polaris truly unleash her powers and accept who she is. And he does this by sharing all of the memories with Magneto. And it's at this point we get a montage from Charles to Polaris about Magneto, about all the memories they shared. And the thing that I really loved is that it wasn't all of their happy moments. Some of it was them battling against one another. Some of it was highlighting their true friendship. But at the end of the day, what it was highlighting was who Magneto was as a person. And it also highlighted the theme of this episode, redemption, and understanding that no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you've done, you are not truly lost. You're not truly gone. There is still hope as long as you decide to keep on going, to keep on trying. You can always build a better tomorrow as long as you don't give up on that tomorrow. And seeing this sentiment shared from Charles to Polaris was absolutely beautiful to see. And her truly accepting her abilities and accepting that she indeed is the daughter of Magneto was one of my favorite moments from this entire season. And I feel like she is going to have a relatively big role in the latter half of this season. She went through that tremendous character growth, and in my opinion, she is now going to be a full-fledged member of the X-Men. So I feel like we are going to see a lot more of her moving forward, and her having the same powers as Magneto is definitely going to help the X-Men overall against Apocalypse. And thanks to Polaris working alongside Charles, they were able to defeat Danger. And a little bit later on in the episode, we actually see that Charles finally understands. You see, this moment wasn't just impactful for Polaris, but it was actually really impactful for Charles Xavier as well. It helped him to deal with his trauma, to deal with the grief that he had festering inside of him. And it helped him to understand what he thinks Magneto would truly want him to do moving forward, how he can truly build a better world. And it's at this point we see that he decides to build upon the rubble of Genosha a new organization. And we see the official birth of XCorp, a mutant organization that is going to be dedicated to improving mutant society in the entire world. And although the public sentiment isn't great about XCorp, and we even see members of X Factor start to talk about this, and they even mention that Charles Xavier thinks he is beyond jurisdiction, but he is not. And in my opinion, I just feel like this is going to eventually set up some type of Avengers versus X-Men a couple seasons later on. We already know that the creators have spoken about how long they want this series to last. They have stated they want it to go on for about 5 to 6 seasons. And considering the fact that we've already seen a little bit of friction between some members of the Avengers and some members of the X-Men, I think it is really possible that we eventually have a type of storyline where the Avengers have to take on the X-Men, where the public sentiment gets so bad that we actually finally get to see X-Men versus Avengers, maybe in some type of mutant registration act. And considering the fact that we also have characters like the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man in this universe, I feel like that could be an entire season's worth of a story right there. And it could be incredibly compelling because we would obviously be on the side of the X-Men. However, from the Avengers point of view, and depending on who is on the side of the Avengers, a lot of people might understand understand or even agree with what the Avengers side is trying to do at that moment. And in my opinion, when you have two sides that you could see where both of them are coming from, that is when we get some of the best stories ever. That is why Magneto is one of, if not the best villains in all of Marvel. However, the positives for this episode do not end there, because before the episode finally ends, some of the members of XCorp decide to sit around and talk about a looming threat. And this is when Charles says that he's been sensing something, that a danger has arisen. And this is when they show Apocalypse on a hologram, and you just know that these last 3 episodes are going to be absolutely insane. And this is highlighted by the fact that at the very end of the episode, we finally see the return of Gambit. We see Apocalypse trying to reanimate someone, trying to bring them back to life. And before the credits roll, we see who it is, as playing cards swarm the body, resurrecting him, and we see Gambit's eyes open. Now officially one of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. And I can't even imagine how emotional the interactions are going to be once members of the X-Men, specifically Rogue, see Gambit once again. However, not only that, having to battle against Gambit because he is literally one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. And I think when they realize this, Apocalypse is going to have some type of dialogue exchange with Charles, and he is going to mention the fact that all the way back in the past, he even said something like this. He said this was essentially what he was going to do, and now he made true on that promise. So moving forward throughout the rest of the season, I think we're in for an insane couple of episodes. My only real worry is that we only have 3 episodes left to wrap up this insane storyline. However, I could definitely see them leaving off season 2 with an insane cliffhanger, and the X-Men might actually lose at the end of this season. They might not be able to defeat Apocalypse, and a lot of season 3 might be them dealing with the loss to Apocalypse, and we'll end up seeing them even more down and out than we've seen them before. Now, all that praise aside, I did have one negative with this episode, only one, and that one negative is something that I kind of had with the last episode, and that is the fact that we still realistically haven't gotten any type of reaction from Rogue. She hasn't said anything about the death of Magneto. She hasn't freaked out at all about the death of Magneto. Yes, we got to see Polaris and Charles go through their trauma and deal with the fact that they lost Magneto and accepting themselves and accepting what they're supposed to do. But I feel like Rogue is a character who not only just lost Magneto, but also had to deal with losing Gambit. And all of that, in my opinion, should have come to a head and led to her having an insane crash out. The only reason that I could think they didn't give her this crash out moment in this specific episode is because they are saving all of that and saving all of that trauma being built up for the next episode when she inevitably reunites with Gambit. And I feel like that could be an incredible emotional payoff if they do force us to wait multiple weeks only to see it all come to a head when she is reunited with the love of her life after having to accept not only his loss but also the accept of the other person that she loved in Magneto, and still not truly processing all of that grief and all of that loss. So next week's episode is probably the thing that I am looking forward to most. I feel like it could be an incredibly emotional journey for Rogue specifically, and for a lot of other members of the X-Men being reunited with Gambit once again. And it'll be really interesting to see how all of them deal with seeing their old friend again, now turned enemy. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. What did you think of the episode overall? Do you think Apocalypse is going to be defeated by the end of this season, or do you think he'll continue to be a looming threat in this universe? And do you think they are ultimately building up to some type of Avengers versus X-Men storyline? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.